Well, it's tough to get enough of that sweet southern drawl from Jon Shieber. So we're going to bring him back up with our next panelist. Please welcome to the stage David Rutter from R3 and again, Jon Shieber.
I get a feeling of deja vu from this scenario. The interviewer is so nice, they're having me twice. From robotics, we're moving on into the wild world of blockchain technology. And to help me sort of excavate all of the trials and travails and fascinating things that are going on in the world of blockchain, I have David Rutter, who is the founder and CEO of R3. And previously, he was with ICAP for 10 years, right?
That's correct, John.
And working on OTC derivatives trading? Or what were you doing at ICAP?
I ran their electronic trading business, which included Broker Tech and EBS, which are the two largest fixed income and FX electronic exchanges in the world. So I ran their electronic execution business.
All right. Well, question for the audience. How many of y'all, show of hands, hold any Bitcoin at all? All right. A fair few of y'all. So how many of y'all want to hear Mr. Rutter explain a little bit about the difference between what Bitcoin is doing and what blockchain is doing? Actually, I don't think we need that. Y'all seem pretty savvy. Congratulations. With the blockchain technology, what is it about blockchain that would lead banks to want to adopt it? Why are banks sort of gravitating to the system?
So banks are probably the most highly regulated organizations in the world. And the cost of doing business to support compliance and the like is enormous. And it makes perfect sense, of course. If you think about them taking care of grandma's retirement funds or transferring your money, you want to make sure that it's secure. And we all trust our banks, although we like to say we don't. And I've had that discussion. If I gave someone a chunk of money, what would they do with it?
Right.
They'd likely run off to the banks. So the cost is quite significant, and these new technologies create a kind of once-in-a-generation opportunity to reconsider how financial transactions, how transactions are made and confirmed, and how payments are transferred about the globe in a way that is much more efficient. And John, just to throw out one statistic, McKinsey estimates that supporting transactions and global payments amongst large global financial institutions costs about $3.6 trillion a year. So that's an enormous opportunity for R3 and others in the space.
What is it that's unique, though, about the blockchain that will enable this to happen? So my sense is that banks already have an array of technologies that can allow expedited money transfer, that can make sure that those transactions have happened in seconds. Why blockchain now? How is this not just hype?
So part of what you said is true. They do have an array of technologies, and that's the problem. Many institutions have built their own technologies. They don't communicate well. They rely on APIs to communicate even internally. So there is this kind of this spaghetti string of technologies that have evolved over the last 30 to 40 years. Many of the technologies are 20, 25, 30 years old, and each financial institution pays and supports this infrastructure for themselves. Given new cryptographic tools and blockchains and distributed ledgers, we have an opportunity to create a secure financial infrastructure in the cloud, which would allow banks to move all of this data from behind their firewall safely and securely into the cloud.
I guess what I still sort of run aground on is the notion that there's already security technologies that are out there. There are already cloud technologies that are out there that don't sort of operate under the haze of sort of blockchains. There's a lot of hype, I guess, around blockchain. And it seems to me that there are a lot of technologies that can fulfill a lot of these operations for banks and companies without needing to adopt this sort of kind of arcane, kind of opaque cryptocurrency penumbra, if you will, or operate within that sort of fog.
So John, I think that there's been a lot of hype around Bitcoin and some of the early technologies and kind of disrupting all financial institutions, which, may happen, probably not in my lifetime. So what these technologies really are allow us, like I said, the key point is to move transactions. So if you and I do a trade, I don't record it in a manner that you're not aware of, and we have to depend on a third party to reconcile it. We can push these transactions to the cloud, and we can use software to do many of the reconciliation services that are now done by humans at the individual institutions.
Would that get rid of something like LIBOR and the need for these kinds of interbank exchanges, or?
Well, what it would do from the regulatory perspective, I think LIBOR as a reference rate is still absolutely crucial. But if you and I entered a transaction, there would be a tamper-resistant record of that transaction created immediately in the cloud, and then we can use an oracle that imports the LIBOR rate in order to determine the payment that we have to transfer between ourselves. And that, of course, is a panacea for regulators now, because the way it works, or in the future, the way it works now is that we record those on paper, on tickets, or we enter them into
Well, there have been
systems.
shenanigans around specifically LIBOR.
The idea of hiding a ticket, which has been a problem on Wall Street, or trying to manipulate a trade, will be a thing of the past, and it will bring a great deal of additional security to financial markets.
Is there any sort of cognitive dissonance between y'all using the same underlying technology as like crazy crypto anarchists who are adopting this sort of Bitcoin stuff with an idea to get rid of global financial institutions or obviate the need for them?
So I think that we were inspired by some attributes or aspects of Bitcoin and Ethereum, but Corte, which we open sourced last week, is our own distinct distributed ledger designed from the ground up for financial institutions in collaboration with our over 70 member banks.
Right.
So we were very careful in thinking deeply about the type of technologies we had to build to support transactions in the cloud.
Why did you open source Corte?
Well, we think that, and Richard Gendel-Brown, who is my CTO and well known to the Bitcoin community, ex-IBM Innovations Lab, felt strongly that there's an advantage to getting more eyeballs on such a crucial piece of future market infrastructure. We look at Corte as creating as a foundational technology for the next 20 to 30 years. So while we have thought deeply, and R3 has spent a lot of time with our members thinking about how we build this technology, we want to open it up to the scrutiny of the world. We want others to build applications on it. And there's some of the privacy and security features of Corte that lend itself quite well to medical records and insurance and other fields completely. They're just kind of beyond the scope of R3 and what we're looking at. So that was the driver.
Is there some concern among the member banks about the fact that y'all did open the technology up? I mean, it's sort of antithetical to the ways that banks currently operate.
That's true, but the world is changing. And I think that the banks themselves are worried about vendor lock-in. When we talk about the way the systems work today, there's many providers of trade processing systems, post-trade, pre-trade, payment systems, and you usually have a licensing fee, and you're kind of, once that vendor is integrated into your workflow, you're stuck with them. So there's some advantages to open source, and I think that while it will evolve more slowly in global finance than in some other areas, I think that that is what the market participants will expect moving forward.
Is you mentioned that you have 70, there's 70 member banks or roughly around that?
Yeah, a little over 70 member banks. We're adding them every week, so if I throw out a number, it's 73 or 74, but depends on what time it is.
Is that too many? Like, how many cooks do spoil the soup?
So that's such a great question. There's many times that I feel like it's too many. Within the last half hour, for sure. But there's also the thing about these technologies, let's think, for example, if we want to replace how global payments work, okay?
Right.
And this isn't just about banks. This is about supporting trade. We have a massive effort in trade finance. And you think about little exporters in Indonesia, and they want to sell their teak furniture for you to put on your patio, and you actually follow how expensive and how long it is for that entrepreneur to get their money. We can really examine all of this freshly, but in order to do that, you don't do that with 3 or 4 banks in the eastern United States. We have a very globally dispersed group of supporters.
Right.
And what we do is we try to build consensus on the technology. We don't try to push just our technology. In our lab, we have Ethereum, we have the IBM Fabric, we have Chain and a number of other providers. So and we try to build consensus, and we're trying to make big change, so we need a big network.
Well, so I mean, you say that, but some of well, one of the biggest and most successful investment banks in the world actually sort of decided that wasn't the case. Can you talk a little bit about why Goldman Sachs and then Santander left the consortium?
Yes, I'll talk about it a little bit. So listen, I find this kind of amazing. We had 42 banks that have all sponsored us and done work and contributed to our code and to our work product. As a matter of fact, we've had over 1,100 people at our member banks either work on white papers or write code. So it's been very successful. And then we've begun a funding round, which always gets a little bit interesting. And when you have a large crowd, it's tough to kind of meet everybody's criteria. And I think in the case of Goldman, they like to see a smaller group. From a management perspective, actually, and I've been involved in consortiums before, and this is more like a network of members. In some ways, it's better to have a larger group because you end up with a governance structure that looks very much like what you would see in a public company because you have so many shareholders.
So the reports are that the round is for $150 million. Has it closed yet? Where are y'all at in the process?
No, it has not closed, but we're making very good progress. It will close in the early part of the new year. We have a lot of lawyers working on the documents right now, but things are going very well and according to plan. And one thing I'll say is that I've made a good bit of money in my career. I've spent a good bit of money, and this is the first time I've ever raised it, and hopefully it'll be the last.
Yeah, it doesn't sound fun from well, it depends on the product, but a lot of investors or entrepreneurs I talk to really hate it.
Yeah, I would like to meet an entrepreneur who enjoyed his funding round.
Yeah. Just getting back to this notion of the sort of multitude of lawyers that are involved in the process now, I'm curious who's in the room at the meetings when y'all are getting together and there are these 70 institutions that have to try to make a decision about something. Are these the CTOs? Is this just like some guy on the back end who happens to be like a blockchain enthusiast who's come on because...
So they're kind of a couple different questions, and it depends on what part of our work you're talking about. You know, we've done a good bit of work with the regulators. We've met over 100 regulators in the past year. Our philosophy is about trying to build Corte and components on top of it. So think of that as being the plumbing and the infrastructure for the future of finance. But in order to actually get transactions flowing through those pipes, we need the regulators to understand them. We need to integrate into the current legal system and is the documentation and the like. So we've kind of taken a holistic approach to this. So to answer your specific questions, R3 drives the agenda very clearly. If it comes to the Corte design, for example, we had an architectural working group which comprised of the best and the brightest from the innovation and CIO offices from the various banks. If it's the regulatory working committee group, we have the senior people in the compliance and the legal and regulatory side of the banks.
So taking the notion of plumbing, right, and building out this new network of pipes, that seems to be an incredibly tedious process when there's a network of pipes that already exists, right? So what are your expectations for when this new system of pipes gets built? When is water or when are transactions actually going to flow through?
So the pipes, current pipes are corroding and they're inefficient, and there's a tremendous amount that can be saved.
Thanks for working with me on this.
I was thinking about it. I should have picked something else other than plumbing. I went down the pipe route. But so I think that we're looking at something that we've gotten Corte out in 10 months, which is great. We'll continue to build components of this, but I think it's like any it's not public works. It's like any project of that sort. It will always be built. I think that the system will be used in 3 to 5 years very substantially.
3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years until we see substantial adoption of all components, but we're going to have product in the market by end of next year.
What is the product? What's the first product that's coming to market?
So there's a couple different things of interest. One is in the trade finance area. There's some easy, we believe some easy wins around asset registries and the like, and it deals with the double spend of accounts receivable, for example. We have a lot of work going on in the payment space. We have 5 different payment projects. We're not going to try to solve global payments from the start, but we have some interesting projects that have been announced, one with the Canadian government, one with the Singaporean government, around interbank payments to create efficiency just between the banks themselves. And those types of things, because we're working with a smaller group, can be built and deployed very quickly, still keeping in mind what the longer term goals of the global infrastructure is.
And again, keeping in mind that these banks are already operating, they're making these transactions happen. The difference is that now there would be this ledger on which people could refer back to for any sort of historical record of the payment?
Well, it depends on what area we're talking about. Okay, so if we look at global payments right now, and you purchase something, I use the Indonesian teak manufacturer. You know, we're talking about it's very expensive. It takes several days, as opposed to instantaneous payment, which of course is done with Bitcoin and Ethereum and any other number of currencies, and something that Ripple, a firm we respect very much, is working on. So it depends which part you're talking about. I can't give you a blanket statement. As opposed to payments, it's about getting there cheaper and more efficiently. And some of the work we're doing in, say, OTC derivatives is about having trades that stand immediately, as opposed to all the reconciliations and expenses on broken trades. And then in interesting things like collateral movement. It's very hard to move collateral around amongst institutions right now, and with Basel III and other new regulations coming on board where capital really matters, maybe coming up with a tokenized basis where you can legally transfer ownership of securities that don't actually have to move from that custodian is very interesting and promising.
So how would you contrast the work that y'all are doing with the work from companies like Chain or discrete applications like Circle?
Okay, so we've taken a harder route, I think, but one that holds greater promise. In most cases, when you're building a company, you'd say you're going to solve a specific problem. I'm going to go solve syndicated loans, or I'm going to go solve global payments. We've been thinking more broadly about this, in part because of our history and our experience, and that is these systems today don't communicate very well. So when we look at the way the web works, we're trying to take a more holistic view to make sure that our payment solutions can interoperate with our derivative solutions and our credit solutions and the like. So we're working with the banks. We're starting a little broader, and we're building more of the infrastructure where I think Chain is looking very much at delivering a specific solution. And we've got a lot of time for Adam too. That's another good organization.
Can you talk a little bit more about the government projects that you're working on? These are going to be the first things that come to market. Is that correct?
They have a potential to be. We have a number of horses in the race at the moment, so it's tough for me to predict which one's going to win.
Well, I mean, if you could name a couple of those horses.
I think that the 2 projects that we're working on, one in Canada and one in Singapore, are very interesting.
This is about interbank payments.
Yeah, it's about interbank payments. So tokenization of fiat currency, so I can move a token from Royal Bank of Canada to Scotia that represents Canadian dollars and do it very, very quickly, or do it instantaneously and at no cost. And that's a pretty big deal.
Why is that such a big deal?
Well, because you can't do
Because
it
you can't
today
do it right now, yeah.
in the way the current rails work. And then, you know, in Southeast Asia, we're working with the MAS. They've been very progressive in their thinking about how they can use these new technologies to not just improve payments, but to improve life for their citizens. I mean, one of the things, you know, I talk about a lot is right now, the way we talk about financial data or medical records or whatever, we as individuals don't control those things. And I think over time, and not that long from now, you know, we will be able to just biometrically on our up a QR code when we go to our doctor
Or in our hand with the open
yeah,
biometric, right?
by the way, that was so hyper cool. I was
Yeah,
like,
wasn't it cool?
I can't believe I got to come on after those guys and talk about distributed ledgers.
Look, blockchain in the future of
But,
finance is super
yeah.
cool too, man. Come on.
I know, I got to build that into the hand somehow. But, so anyway, I think that, you know, you can easily think about how Uber's changed things, or
Right.
Halo, and all these other applications. With global finance, you know, you should be able to have the ability to do that, but you also need, sticking with the plumbing analogy,
All right.
you need the plumbing in place to be able to
Right.
do that. And, you know, part of what we're working towards is to allow free flow of goods and services and cash that will improve everybody's life over time.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of wood to chop.
And with that, we are out of time. David, it's a pleasure, sir.
Hey, John, thank you very
so
much. Cheers.
Thank you all.